Alright YouTube, so for this vlog I had the pleasure of watching the movie The Suicide Squad on HBO Max. No, this is not a sponsored ad, but yes, I did get the inspiration from a piece of artwork I saw on Reddit of Pokemon characters as Suicide Squad characters, more particularly the characters from the 2021 The Suicide Squad, which I had admittedly started watching shortly after it had come out, and I think like around 2022 was when I started watching it because I know it came out August 2021, and I'll say that I definitely missed an opportunity to see this in the theaters, which, not 100% sure it even came to theaters because of the pandemic at the time, but I do recall seeing a few movies even before August of 2021 in theaters, but I'm going in circles, so we'll get back to the way I wrote movie notes, which I don't often script my videos, but, I figure I ought to write some notes because I really love this movie, so that'll be the biggest major spoiler of this vlog, is that this movie was terrific, and honestly, I really love James Gunn's style. I honestly like this movie even more than the recent Superman that came out, but not quite as much as Thunderbolts, which is really underrated and such a tragedy that something in the opening scene that stood out to me, although it doesn't really come up at any other point in the movie, is the little canary, which I like to think is a symbol of Black Canary from Arrow or Green Arrow's universe, as they say. So I was definitely getting soft reboot vibes from this movie, as it sort of has similar characters or some of the same characters from the previous DCU Suicide Squad, which was not the greatest movie ever, but I will admit when I was 15 years old and I first saw it in the theaters, I did think it was cool, but thought almost every superhero movie that came out at that time was cool, which does give me sort of somewhat of a sentimental value to 2016 Suicide Squad, but after watching it not long after, I realized, like, yeah, not the greatest, and I can see why it was kind of an infamous movie. That being said, two characters that were the furthest thing from infamous were Harley Quinn and Rick Flag, which, as fate would have it, were both characters in this movie and did amazing jobs. I really like both characters in this. Of course, Amanda Waller, who's a cold, ruthless character, but very interesting, and it was interesting to also see some of her government official workers betting on who would survive the Suicide Squad, because there are two teams at the start of this movie, which, is the Weasel is one of the characters that quickly goes out the window, which I wasn't surprised about, but, he was definitely funny while he came on, as well as I'm forgetting his exact character's name, but the guy played by Pete Davidson. I wasn't surprised that his character kind of went out early because, they got such a big star in a DC movie. And, something I found really funny was when everyone was thinking, or some characters were thinking, Weasel was a werewolf, which, I love werewolves, and I got to draw more werewolves for the 2026 upcoming werewolf movie by Nosferatu director. I also really love the music that comes on during this opening scene, that also comes on during a few other scenes throughout the movie. I will say, this might be a minor spoiler, but I was very sad that Captain Boomerang died so early. I was really hoping he'd be in the movie a little longer, but it makes sense after all. Later as the movie goes on, something I did notice is that the movie kind of plays itself like, sort of little flashbacks to very short periods of time, like, being, it says 3 days later, which kind of gave me vibes of the sort of character arcs similar to the 2025, this movie just came out a week ago, what am I saying, or 2 weeks ago, Weapons, which I did quite like, especially on a second viewing. I really like how this movie also sort of takes itself through its characters and, shines a light on the characters well, and, I really like that it was able to give each character a good arc without sort of oversaturating it. That way it didn't feel like a mess. That way, sort of some left for the audience to one of the lead characters played by Idris Elba, who also voices Knuckles, who's super cool. His character is Bloodsport. He has a daughter who he's not have a good tongue twister there, who he does not have a good relationship with, but who may be tried as an adult in a trial, which, could send her back to the prison of where Bloodsport is, as well as other notorious, horrible criminals. So that definitely is incentivizing to him to get Amanda Waller's mission done, because otherwise he could care less. King Shark was in it a little bit less than I expected, but he was definitely very funny, and although he was like one of those characters that sort of probably wasn't a terrible lot they could do with, I really enjoyed also Ratcatcher 2, who is the daughter of the original Ratcatcher. I enjoyed when she and King Shark became friends. I thought it was a very wholesome and heartwarming scene, and I really applaud the director James Gunn for making a Ratcatcher and a human shark amazing characters. Not that I don't know that he's able to do that, as we've seen with Guardians of the Galaxy with Rocket and Groot. A tree and a talking raccoon were both super cool characters. We have Polka Dot Man, I recognize his actor from The Dark Knight, as well as a small handful of other DC projects. Of course, we have the character portrayed by John Cena, Pacemaker, or Peacemaker. I always forget. I always get his name confused. Sometimes I say Peacemaker, sometimes Pacemaker, tongue twister for me. But I know he has his own series, which I have yet to watch, but I may have to check it out after seeing how interesting this movie was. I'm curious to see how his character's arc plays out, but I'm not sure how it pans out with him in the new DC cinematic universe, because I've heard that the original DCEU, which this movie was a part of, is retcon. So hopefully, though, we still see Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, because she was amazing in this movie. I liked some of her character's tattoos, and the sequence of her and the guy's romance was definitely interesting, and she definitely learned from her mistakes with Joker, so that's good character development. And I do like when she was like being portrayed as a princess, because it kind of showed Harley Quinn's humanity through her character and through all the torture that Joker put her through. The movie also has its own car chase, or rather military vehicle chase scene, which a lot of DC movies have car chase scenes, which I certainly have no complaints about, especially not the one in the movie that came after the year after this movie came out, the Batman 2022. Sort of not as epic, but definitely an epic military car chase scene. Although I'm not much of a bar person myself, I did really enjoy the bar club scene in the Spanish country, where it was like really cool seeing the characters sort of bond and have drinks together. It sort of brought them closer. When the vlog will contain a spoiler, I was really sad when Rick Flag died. Admittedly, I kind of expected it, because I may or may not have heard a little bit of his character's passing away in the movie, so that was definitely a tearjerker. Not really, but a sad scene nonetheless. So I'll miss his character, and hopefully for the new Harley Quinn, we still see Margot Robbie, even though it's a soft reboot, because she was terrific in this movie, and even in the original Suicide Squad or not the original Suicide Squad per se, but 2016 Suicide Squad, she was great in that too, and one of the highlights. So I will say I'm glad Joker wasn't in this movie, because I don't think he would have fit well, but the Starfish scene was also really compelling and interesting, and I won't get into the spoiler details of that, but I will say it was cool to see. Now for the end of this vlog, I'm going to show you guys some of my Funko Pops, which are Suicide Squad. Here you have a character, Peacemaker himself. Although from a separate universe, this is Star Wars equivalent of the Suicide Squad Harley Quinn, Jyn Erso. Here we have DC Harley Quinn, or the Harley Quinn per se, which super cool costume. Love this. Shout out to the OG. And here we have Bane, who's probably a little too overpowered for Suicide Squad. Probably be a character Suicide Squad would have to take down. So yeah, until then, thank you guys so much for watching. I love this movie. Can't wait to give you guys more movie reviews. Until then, stay tuned for soon. Goodbye.